everyone. My name is Chris Fox, and I'm an applied social science major here. I'm a junior. And you guys might be asking, what is there that I can say about Star Wars? Is there anything that hasn't been said? And my answer is yes. I recently did a case study which deeply analyzed the 6 films encompassed in George Lucas's Star Wars saga. And I took a sociological and anthropological view to the saga. And today I'll share a few of my findings in my paper. And for those of you that are interested, I can share my paper with you via email, and you can actually read it. So this takes me to my original research question. And that is, how does George Lucas's Star Wars saga represent a utopianized image of society? So first, let's take a look at the Jedi Knights. So higher power is represented in the Star Wars universe through the Force. And Jedi philosophy is based heavily on Taoism and Buddhism. And they're used to represent how religion can be harnessed to do both good and evil. And they're inextricably intertwined with politics. And a huge part of my paper focused on how the Jedi Knights present alternative constructions of masculinity. And in some of the well-known Jedi, such as Obi-Wan Kenobi and Yoda, I find very interesting because they encompass traditionally devalued feminine traits, yet they are perceived as some of the most powerful beings in the universe. And these traits are compassion, empathy, peace, nurturance. They demonize anger, gratuitous violence, greed, power-mongering, individuality. And one quote that I always like from Star Wars is, Yoda simply says, "Wars do not make one great," when he is himself a very powerful warrior. So, this is contrary to the dark side of the Force, which is fueled by anger, jealousy, fear, hate, the lust for power, and personal gain. So I also spent a great deal of time talking about feminism in Star Wars. And we have we have the female characters that are prevalent in Star Wars seem to all be very strong and independent and empowered, and they're in positions of political power. And this is a consistent theme throughout all 6 films. They're depicted as leaders of progressive oppositional movements, and they are often leaders of militant operations. And I find this very interesting because in our society, it's just the opposite, unfortunately. Princess Leia especially works to subvert the very sexist damsel in distress narrative. And there's many points in the Star Wars films where men are revealed as impotent next to women. And specifically, these themes can all be found in Leia, Padme, and Mon Mothma. I also want to talk a little bit about solidarity in Star Wars. This is also a very consistent theme. There's high levels of solidarity depicted in the indigenous groups, such as the Ewoks, the Wookiees, and the Gungans. And they all live sustainably in their own environment. And they have this resilient value of community and family. And it's valued greatly over technological advancement, which is contrary to like the Empire, the Republic, or the other strong forces in the universe. And most notably, the Ewoks are able to defeat a highly technologically superior force when they're great numbered. And this is because the point of this is to illustrate that teamwork, compassion, and respect are able to defeat like a more advanced, superior army. So these values are more meaningful, I guess, is the message. Also, the ethics of technological advancement is a very large theme in the Star Wars saga. Specifically in the context of militarism and imperialism. One thing is, it's noted that it's very highly unethical to modify the genetic structure in cloned humans, as ultimately it leads to great abuse of power. It also warns us about the dangers of advancements in weaponry, with the Death Stars, which are able to destroy entire planets and systems. And this is very relevant because we're moving in a direction where a lot of people fear that ultimately we will destroy ourselves through weaponry and bombs and whatnot. Also, Star Wars alludes to the dangers of corporate power, specifically in the prequel films with the Trade Federation, which is the galaxy's largest trade cartel. It's overthrown by the Empire years before the events of the original trilogy, but it eventually grows so powerful that it dominates over entire systems, possesses its own droid army, and is involved in many assassinations, unjust invasions, and other criminal activity. So, what's next for me? I hope that people will read my paper. I plan on continuing to explore more themes. I'm interested in looking at the Christian themes in Star Wars, including redemption, self-sacrifice, altruism, and afterlife. I'm interested also in analyzing the Luke-Vader relationship dynamic, and I'm kind of interested in Foucault's theory and applying that to Star Wars to help understand. I think I want to apply that to like the Skywalker twins. And I'm also interested in Don Harway's ideas about people's love and hate relationships with machines, and applying that to Han Solo's characterization. And these are my references from my paper. And going back to my original research question, which is, how does George Lucas represent a utopianized image of society? I think that Star Wars speaks to our hopes and dreams about the future of society, and ultimately it's just a story of dehumanizing oppression and a classic tale of the triumph of good against evil. And it's also, I think, it's very relevant to when Star Wars was originally released in the late 70s. It began in a very interesting era in the United States, and this was during such great national disasters such as Vietnam and the Watergate scandal. And during this time, sexual identities were beginning to be redefined by the women's movement, and the majority of the films in the 1970s were downbeat and pessimistic and featured anti-heroes. And but Star Wars created something new, a sense of renewal and optimism and spiritual values that look to satisfy hopes of children and adults. Thank you. So does anyone have any comments, questions? Yes.
Okay, I'm going to geek out a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So, so in the original trilogy, I think there was, ultimately, it was a story of love triumphing over anger and evil. But when the prequels were created, there's a lot. I mean, the storyline there was somewhat of a disconnect in a number of different ways with the original trilogy. And one of the big problems or issues from a feminist standpoint was that what created Darth Vader was his love for Padme, and basically, it was the source of evil, and it was ultimately it triumphed over evil. But love had a very complicated sort of dynamic going on, and it seems contradictory in the two different trilogies.
Yeah, I actually have things to say about that. But I totally see what you're saying. Sorry, I gotta refer to my actual paper. So in the Star Wars saga, there's like two heterosexual dyads. We have Han Solo and Leia, and So, like in the original trilogy, as you're saying, like I feel like George Lucas tries to reverse the classically sexist heterosexual relationship dynamic. So when audiences first meet Han Solo, he's mercenary, apolitical, and he's like an apolitical drug trafficker, and he's only concerned about personal gain. And he's very much so invested in the traditional notions of masculinity. And upon meeting Leia, he's attracted to her, but this doesn't evolve until later, until the end. But Leia, on the other hand, deviates from traditional notions of femininity. And in the end, Leia spends more time rescuing Han than Han spends rescuing her. And Han ultimately changes himself to be with her. And she's able to remain very political and doesn't change herself, so this kind of reverses that sexual dynamic. Going back to the Anakin Skywalker-Padme relationship, like you said, Anakin begins his downward path when he becomes possessive and attempts to dominate over Padme out of a fear of losing her. And the end of their relationship, it alludes to it becoming, abusive. There's that scene where he force chokes her, and the film ultimately vilifies the abuser, with him becoming Darth Vader. So in a way, it's also saying that this is wrong. You should never treat your partner like this. A sexual relationship needs to be based out of respect. And Padme's death is one of the great things that alludes to the transformation of Vader. So, I guess does that kind of answer your question?
I think so, but I think part of in the prequels, they basically say the reason why Jedi are supposed to be celibate is that if they love someone, they're going to become possessive and they're going to lead down that path. But to me, what happens at the end of all of it, in the original trilogy, at the end of the whole storyline in the films, is that love triumphs over everything. But it seems like the way that they talk about love as being a source of all of this downward spiral versus comes back and I think it has a lot to do with how you watch the films too. So you have people who say you're supposed to watch it in order from people to the original or the other one.
Yeah, because that's definitely change your perspective. But I don't know. There's definitely different types of love, and I don't think that the Padme, that was like a relationship that was doomed from the start. It was secretive. It was not balanced properly. So I don't know. It's hard for me to maybe agree that it's love that's the problem, because it seems to me more about control. But I definitely like that point, though.
Right, I guess we're going to set up this.
Okay.
So you guys can continue discussing.
Yeah.
I had a question. What did you say? What did the Jedi Knights represent in our society? Did you make that correct?
Yeah, I know. I just turned white. No, it doesn't. Yeah. The Jedi Knights, I kind of talked about how they are.
Links to religion.
They're kind of intermediary forces to God. So it's almost like they can do God's will through the Force. So we have the Jedi and the Sith, these binaries of people doing God's will.
So the Jedi's are kind of like Catholic priests. They're supposed to be celibate.
Right, there may be some influence, I'm sure. Because, Buddhists also are celibate, and yeah.
So how would you interpret the Jedi Order having to die and collapse in order for a new order to come to be brought into fruition?
Well, this is interesting because upon the destruction of the original Jedi Order, I don't know if you guys are familiar with what happens after, but there's a new Jedi Order, and in this Jedi Order, Jedis are allowed to love. So they're able to learn from this instead of, I guess, like not loving it all. They're able to like integrate it, make it work for them.
Yeah, I think that goes back to the balance that we were talking about, because fear-based love is not fear love.
Right, and that Anakin relationship is definitely like fear-love. And, I think that's because he didn't start out, Jedi. He was like influenced growing up as a slave, and that's very much what he knows. I think is just control. So he wasn't brought up, in the normal Jedi order.